In Python, args and kwargs are just a way of passing an unknown number of arguments to a method. Let's look a little deeper with some examples. To understand what the star operator does in Python, consider this simple example. If I print this array out, I see these brackets that denote this is an array, and I also see the elements inside it. Now, if I put a star right before the array and print it out, I only see the elements now. We call this unpacking. In Python, you can unpack arrays or tuples. Now, how does this fit into the context of args and kwargs? Let's look at this method. So I have a method that says hi to anybody who walks into a room. So let's say Frank walks into a room, and then Alex walks into a room, and I see hi Frank, hi Alex, everything is fine. Now suddenly we have a new use case where two people walk into the room at the same time. Now if I call this, as you expect, we see an error that is telling us this function only accepts one argument, but we are passing two. There are a few ways that we could go about a situation like this. We could accept an array instead of a string in this case. We could add some if-elses and use two arguments to address this. But the cleanest way to solve this problem is to just add a star right before the argument that we're taking, and in this case where we are printing this out. So if I run this, again, everything is fine. I'm able to pass one or two arguments. So what this star operator is doing here is this method is now accepting an unpacked array or tuple, which means it accepts 0 or more arguments. So even if I call this function without an argument, this is still valid as far as Python is concerned. The last point that I want to make about the star operator here is that you can also iterate over that value that you're passing. So if instead of the previous method I use a for loop and I try to say hi to each individual that walks in separately, I can do that as well, the same way that I would do it if I had an array. Now you usually see the keyword args, and which stands for arguments, but you could really use any keyword that you like. The magic really happens because of the star operator. A famous method that you probably have used in Python that takes advantage of this is print. So you see this star right before values. That means print accepts any number of arguments. So if I print 2 plus 2 and print this out, this is fine. If I add a second argument and the third argument, the print function works just fine. Okay, let's clear all of this up and talk about kwargs. The concept of kwargs is very similar to what we just discussed. Kwargs stands for keyword arguments. Let's go through an example. So I have this method that just prints out what we pass to it. And if you notice, for kwargs, we have 2 stars. Now, the way that this works is if I have arguments that have a keyword, so for example, I'm passing name. If I print this out, you see that key is name, value is Alex. Now, if I pass a second argument with the keyword, again, this works just fine. And I have 2 keys and 2 values. So that's really the only difference. And if you notice, this is basically similar to passing a dictionary. Now, if we combine everything that we just learned together, we can make a slightly larger function. So this function right now accepts args and kwargs, which means I can have some arguments, any number of arguments, and then I can have any number of arguments with keywords. And all this is doing is it is printing out the arguments that I pass it, and then it is iterating over the key value arguments. So this dot items, what it does is it breaks the keyword argument to keys and values. So the key would be, in this case, name or age, and values would be Alex and 31. And then it's just printing them out. So an example of calling this would be something like this. And if I just make this a little smaller, so I am calling this with, passing 3 names, and then I pass 2 arguments that have keywords. So if I print this out, so this first line is the arguments that I passed, and then these 2 lines are the arguments that had keywords. So that's really Args and Kwargs in a nutshell. The biggest use case that I've seen for them is where functions are being future-proofed. So you are writing a function and you don't know necessarily how this is going to be used, how many arguments is going to be passed. So you kind of safeguard yourself from the changes of requirement that are going to come down the road. Or sometimes you have a function and then a use case that you didn't predict appears. So you can easily go and add these args or kwargs to your function and not have to change the method calls all over the place in your code base. So I hope that this cleared out what args and kwargs are used for in Python, and I will see you soon.